everyone, I'm Alyse Thompson-Richards, Editor-in-Chief of Cannabis Products Insider. I'm here today with Samantha O'Donnell, co-founder and CFO of Punch Edibles and Extracts. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
And so I'd like to start at the beginning. How did you get into the cannabis industry and what was your interest in this space?
So I actually had very little interest in this space. I kind of fell into it. I met my now husband, Andrew, on a dating website, and he was in the cannabis industry. He actually owned a dispensary in San Diego. It had gotten shut down before I met him, and he was on his way out of the industry. Um, and we just kind of stumbled upon making some edibles that, long story short, really took off. We gave them to a few dispensaries that were still open that he was friendly with in San Diego. And what we thought would be a little side project turned to be something that we both had to stop what we were doing and fully commit to developing out Punch. And now, almost 10 years later, we are still running the business. We are all over the state of California, Oklahoma, and now recently New York.
And so being almost 10 years now, you started in the medical cannabis space, correct?
Yeah, Prop 215 days, where dispensaries were on every corner and no licenses needed and no packaging requirements and Wild West, as some people might say.
And so how has it been navigating that and especially into the conversion into adult use?
It's definitely been a challenge. You take a bunch of people that come from a specific industry that may or may not have background in business or business development, and you throw them into a overregulated new industry. There's bound to be some trials and tribulations, and we've learned a ton along the way. We thankfully were positioned with a really good team of attorneys and accountants and people that really helped guide and navigate a lot of the legal structure that came out of the California cannabis market. Every state is so different. California does seem to be more on the strict side. And so as we go into new states and we have to learn about what packaging requirements there are and small little sentences that make or break something. It's just really important to have a good team behind you.
Sure, and I'm sure that's true now, even as the markets continue to mature.
Yeah.
Of course, Punch makes a variety of products, but I'd like to talk about the product development a little bit, especially in terms of edibles. Can you talk about how Punch approached developing the Punch Bar?
Yeah, the Punch Bar, our flagship product. So from the beginning, the goal was to try to get as much medicine into as small of a size as possible. When we launched, there was a lot of other companies or competitors at that time that were doing like a full size chocolate bar, like your typical Hershey's bar. And we were just coming from the angle of, well, if people are really trying to use this for medicine, and even the people that are trying to use it recreationally and take a ton at a time, maybe they don't want to sit there and eat an entire chocolate bar. Maybe they just want to have a little bit. And so we had found these molds that were a 2x2 square, and we're like, let's see how much we can fit into this that would still taste good and be edible. And we landed on a 225 milligrams. And so we still keep that same size today. The bar had to have we had to put a grid on it due to legalization, and so we had to break up the dosage. And California only has a max of 100 milligrams. Oklahoma, we have a 250 and 1,000 milligram bar, all in the same size. But we've just kept that really small size, and it works really great for retailers like on the shelves because they can carry a lot of different flavors without it taking up so much room. And then also just for the customer to be able to have a discrete edible that they can portion out or use all at once, whatever their tolerance might be.
Mm-hmm. And so, thinking about those really high dosage limits or counts, how do you manage the flavor then of the bar? Can you really taste the cannabis in the bars, or is it pretty well hidden?
In California, not as much. The 1,000 Definitely you can taste it, but we try to pair it with our a little bit more potent flavors like mint, raspberry, ones that we use a flavoring in to help kind of mask that flavor. A lot of our chocolate bars have inclusions. That was something that set us apart from the very beginning. We actually do a half pour of our chocolate, and then in the middle, we'll add toffee pieces or freeze dried strawberries, graham cracker crumbs, and then we pour chocolate on top. So sometimes you'll see artisan chocolates that have things like all on the back of the bar, which can look really cool. But for testing and uniformity, it doesn't really work for the cannabis space. So we put it on the inside. But if you ever get a chance to crack one open or just take a bite of it, you can see it all in the inside.
That's a great segue into my next question. My understanding is that Punch has a Cookie Delights product where it's half chocolate, half cookie. Can
Yeah.
you talk about the inspiration behind that product and how you manage the manufacturing?
Yeah. Andrew, our founder and CEO, he's a big sweets guy, and he had stumbled upon those cookies. I think they're like English cookies. They have like the cookie bottom and the chocolate on top, and he's like, we should do these. Like it would be so cool. And funny enough, one of our neighbors, where we manufacture, she's actually a cookie manufacturer, and she does cookies for a lot of major brands. And so I approached her, I showed her our molds and what we were trying to do, and that we basically needed half of a punch bar in a cookie. And so she developed out a recipe that worked best for like the flavor we wanted. We would a chocolate one and a vanilla one. We needed it to be a specific like thickness and firmness. And so we nailed all that in. And so they just perfectly fit into our molds, and we are able to pour the chocolate on top. So they're super fun. There's nothing else really like it on the market. And it's just a cool way to have like a half punch bar, half cookie type of collaboration.
And how has the consumer's response been to that product?
I think good. We offer less flavors of those when we do our typical edibles, and they are kind of in a similar package. So I think once people realize that they're different, they're more intrigued to try it. But with punch bars, like we've just been around so long that I think people just have their like cult classics, and you just find people that are like, yeah, I always just buy like 10 cookies and cream bars. Like those are my favorite. That's just what I go to. And so whenever we're doing like in-store events or things like that, we'll try to give promotional units, and we'll try to give ones that people might not have tried so that they can, try and get hooked on a new flavor.
And my understanding, of course, is that you guys make gummies as well. Did that happen right away, or was that a later product introduction?
It was definitely a later product introduction. We actually first came out with fruit snacks. So they are like the texture of your classic like Scooby-Doo snack that you would have in like your kid's lunchbox, which Andrew thoroughly enjoys. And so those ones are really cool because they're actually a vegan option. We don't use gelatin in those. We use agar, which is seaweed based. And so those ones have not a typical gummy texture, but more of a fruit snack texture. And we offer those in 5 different packs. And within each pack, there's 3 different flavors. So it's kind of a cool homage to a, kids traditional snack. And then after that, we came out with your just classic sugar coated gelatin gummies. And there's just always going to be a market for those. Gummies are one of the top selling edibles just in the category. So we had to come out with something like that.
For sure. And as far as the extraction side of the business goes, I want to make sure we touch on that as well. Did that start immediately with the founding of the company, or did you get into extraction later?
We had a couple dabbles in concentrates before legalization. We had a really strong customer base for shatter. Once LA rolled out their licensing program, they didn't allow any volatile extraction. And so unfortunately, with a product like shatter, you need butane, which is volatile. And so we actually invested pretty heavily in some building changes and equipment and all this thing to be ready for that. And then when we found out that they weren't going to roll it out, it was pretty sad because we had built such a big customer base on that product. And so we started dabbling pretty early on into live rosin. At that time, it was more of like a pressed flour situation, and we kind of skipped the like washing step. There wasn't a ton of research, knowledge, skill out about that product. So it didn't go too well for us back then. But then when the whole wave of like the dirty vapes and all these things started coming out, and people really being conscious about what they are consuming, what they're smoking, um, our live rosin really took off. We offer it in 4 tiers. Our tier 1 is for more of your connoisseur. It's a little bit more of an expensive product. And then we offer all the way down to a tier 4, which is still a really good quality material. We just offer it at really good prices to the consumer. And so even if something's supposed to be on like a tier 3 or a tier 2, but we're able to purchase the material at a really reasonable cost, we definitely pass that on to our customer, just because we want to get them excited about what we're producing and all the different strains and the farm partners that we work with. So a couple of years ago, rosin kind of took over the biggest piece of the pie of punch products, and still does.
I don't doubt it at all. It's extremely popular on the marketplace these days. And of course, I want to talk about the expansions that Punch has undergone recently. When did the company go into the Oklahoma market, and what was the interest there?
So we were actually approached by a group that was manufacturing for another brand in Oklahoma, and they wanted to expand their catalog and bring out chocolates. Oklahoma is a very interesting market. It came out really hot and heavy, and there's a ton of dispensaries, and the licenses are fairly cheap, and it's a pretty easy entry. So I think a lot of people got really excited about that and the potential to be in cannabis. And so we're slowly seeing that market kind of regulate itself, see who the players that are going to be a little more long lasting are. So we came in with a licensing deal. It was pretty apparent early on that our licensing partner didn't have too much experience with selling cannabis. And so we took over the operations. We brought our own people in. We bought our own license, and we just continued the path forward. With the medical use out there and the higher milligram dosage, it's been interesting to see what products people want, and if it's more milligram based, or is it more price based. And so we're just finding that our 1,000 milligram gummies and chocolates are kind of where people want it to be, which is just very interesting, because in California we can only do 100, so it's just so different. And so in the long picture of Punch, we always really wanted to have like a foothold on the West Coast, the Midwest, and the East Coast. And so we've just entered the New York market in again, a licensing deal, and we're just super excited to have a presence out there. Back in the Prop 215 days, at all the events we used to attend to and sell to direct to customer, we would have so many people come in from the East Coast and talk about how much they liked our product and how much they wish it was there. And so we're just super excited that we can now be able to sell to that market and those customers.
Definitely. And can you describe a little bit about how it has been operating in the New York market? I know it's been a little bit chaotic out there, so I'd love to hear your take on it.
Yeah, so yeah, very interesting market so far, but that's just to be expected with any new market. The taxes per product are really, really high, and so it makes the retail price higher than we would want it to be, which will, regulate hopefully soon. There's differences in packaging, like we have to mute our colors a little bit to not be a certain oversaturation, so it kind of dulls the packaging a little bit. And just the rollout of stores. I'm not sure what the number is today. Last I think we checked, there was only about like 10 dispensaries open. They have a really big black market in New York, which we used to have here in California. And so I think until that becomes more regulated, it's going to be really hard for the licensed dispensaries to really have a big push. But what I think is really cool is dispensaries can set up at parks and all these different places and sell directly to customers. And so I think there's a lot of like fun social projects that will happen out of that state that California probably will never do. Just because it's such a, well, the city itself is such a condensed area with just so many people that being able to set up in a park or at an activation is just going to be really, really cool for brands. So I'm excited to see more of the social part of that market and the evolution that it can take. But we're just excited to be in a new market, be on, the early stage of it. And hopefully, as more and more people start to move to those licensed stores and they keep seeing Punch, it's going to become a trusted brand that they can hopefully know and love.
Definitely. And of course, you mentioned having a foothold on the East Coast and the West Coast and in the Midwest. Are there any other markets that Punch is looking at this point?
Not at the current time. We do get approached a lot about entering into different markets, and it really just has to do with the structure of the deal as well as like what the current landscape of that market is like. Some states it's really easy to get in, but the landscape is so spread out that maybe a dispensary only sees 50 people a day or something like that. And so the machinery cost and the packaging launch and everything like that is pretty costly for us. And so we just have to kind of weigh out like the pros and cons of each state and see if it's something that we really feel is going to be impactful for us. Right now, we're okay with holding these 3 locations and fingers crossing for a federal legalization at some point, because it would just be very convenient to have these locations and be able to hopefully service the whole country.
Yeah, absolutely. And we mentioned the chocolate bars, we mentioned the fruit snacks and the gummies. Are there any other new products that Punch is introducing soon that you can discuss at this point?
So we do offer some pre-rolls as well. We do a Punch Rocket, which is a hand-rolled glass tip joint that has a rosin snake in it. Most people call it a hash hole because as you're burning it, there's a hole that runs down the middle of it. We do really fun collabs with farm partners on that for the flower, as well as since we make all the rosin in-house, it's all a Punch product. And it's like a more special joint. It's something you would smoke on like the weekend with a friend or, some sort of occasion. And then we also recently launched Punch Stingers. It's a 5-pack of little mini dog walker joints that are indoor flower rolled in keef. So little fuzzy joints. And then we will soon be expanding on the rockets and be doing little mini rockets. So that will probably come out and then probably by the holidays.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, looking at my list here, those are all the questions that I had. Is there anything else that you'd like to discuss that we haven't touched on?
Nothing that comes to the top of my mind. I'm just excited to be talking about our new market entries and just kind of making Punch a well-known house cannabis brand.
Well, thank you so much for sharing the history of the company with me and your expansion plans. It was really wonderful to learn about it.
Thank you so much.